Hey Laowinners, it's Laowinners here with another video, and today I'm going to answer a really difficult and complicated question to answer actually. Is China rich or is China poor? Now, if you watch videos about China or follow Western media about China,
people think I don't like China. I love China. China is the new China, by the way. China.
You can either think that China is a third world hellhole with no running water and dirt roads and no infrastructure, or you can actually think that China is this magical high-tech wonderland, even makes America look like some hollow shell of an outdated country. Now, both of these things are not true because you can't speak about China in terms of absolutes. Basically what I mean is that most people rely on this magical three letters GDP.
Many economists say the GDP figures, China's GDP is our GDP.
Growth GDP.
Growth of GDP.
For GDP. And take your GDP forecast.
By the end of the year, China's GDP.
To determine whether a nation is rich or a nation is poor. Now these numbers are pretty skewed way of looking at things because it doesn't take into account how much people actually earn. GDP, if you look at this figure alone, China is the second richest nation on the entire planet at about $11 trillion. Now that's huge, but does that reflect on how much people actually make? According to the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, China is nowhere near number 2 in terms of GDP per capita, meaning how much do people actually earn? If you actually look at that, China's around number 79 to number 83, depending on what charts you look at, out of about 185 different countries in the world. So that's completely different than looking at it as the second richest nation in the world. Now, a rich nation in terms of GDP does produce good infrastructure. And what do I mean? Well, China has some of the best roads and best park development and awesome tourism development and awesome city building management. There's some really incredible stuff going on here, and it's not just in centers of first-tier cities like Beijing and Shanghai. Even in this third-tier city like Huizhou, I mean, the skyline certainly puts my hometown in rural New York to shame, that's for sure, right? So by all appearances, China looks like this really rich country, even in some of the smaller cities. But like I said, we have to look at something a lot more detailed, and that's per person GDP. Now, if we look at America, the United States, the average GDP, or the average salary that someone makes, is $56,000 a year. Now, if you compare that to China, it's only $14,000 per year. So that actually leaves it in comparison to countries like Colombia or South Africa.
Now, South Africa has a very different kind of a history. If you're Indian, you can be classified as either sort of white or black. So there was this big divide. South Africa is full of many different kinds of people, not just one type, one demographic.
So when you look at that number, you realize that when you compare it to other countries of similar salaries, it's really strange because China seems a lot richer from pictures and videos and news reports than those countries do. So let's delve into it a little bit further. When I first moved to China, the average GDP, or the average salary of someone here, was $5,000 per year, and now we're talking about $14,000. So it's a huge jump and faster than any nation in the world. But that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is if you compare it to Western nations or even other Asian nations, for example, Japan or South Korea, or even Thailand edges out China at $16,000 per year, it makes China seem like a pretty poor country. So we know China's not making as much money per capita as the average Westerner or even the average East Asian country. So where are all these Ferraris coming from? Well, just like America, China suffers from a massive wealth gap. According to a study from Peking University, 1/3 of China's population owns 1% of their wealth. So just like America, there's a huge wealth gap. Now, because most people, when they visit China, they come to the big cities, they get to see this glitzy, gleaming, glamorous lifestyle that the rich people can afford, because China's ever-rising property costs kind of limit the ability for normal people to buy city property. So you don't see a lot of these expensive apartments going to the middle class, maybe like you would back home. To further understand the wealth gap, let's actually look at some provinces and cities. Now, everyone knows Beijing. It's the capital of China. The average salary of Beijing is about $30,000 per year, and that kind of compares it to countries like Estonia and the Czech Republic and Portugal, which is very much first world. Also, Shanghai and Tianjin share about the same kind of per person GDP. So those cities are big metropolises in China, are very much first world in terms of living standard and how much money people actually earn. But if we look at actual provinces in China, things start to change. If you live in Zhejiang, Jiangsu, Inner Mongolia, Fujian, or Guangdong, where we're living right now, the average salary is about $20,000 to $25,000 a year. And those provinces would be comparable to countries like Russia, Turkey, and Argentina. So the wealth is starting to drop. Now, if you drop down even further on China's list of provinces, you're going to see how poor it actually gets. Now, in the bottom 4 provinces of Tibet, Guizhou, Yunnan, and Gansu, which are currently the 4 poorest provinces in China, the average salary turns into $7,000 to $9,000 per year. And you can compare those provinces' average salary to countries like the Philippines, Ukraine, and Morocco. So now you can start to see the wealth gap really kind of flesh itself out. But it doesn't just stop there. The wealth gap gets even crazier. Let's just take my province of Guangdong, or Canton, for example, and look at some cities within Guangdong. Like I said, the average salary of Guangdong's about $19,000 to $20,000 a year. But if you look at just my city here in Huizhou, it's $9,000 per year. And if you go up north to a beautiful city called Shaoguan with almost 3 million people, the average salary is closer to $5,000 per year. So even within the province, and within these cities, there's a massive wealth gap as well. Now I can draw massive parallels to my home country of America. Actually, the per person GDP of New York State, where I come from, is about $72,000 per year. But within my state, I'm from a small city called Binghamton, New York, and the average salary is only $30,000 per year. A massive discrepancy between the state average. Now that means my hometown is comparable to Beijing, China, which I think most people would kind of find crazy. Look at some other states like Mississippi, and the average of that state's only $35,000 per year. So just like China, America also has a huge wealth gap. Now go to any CBD of any major city in China, like in Shenzhen or Beijing, and you can feel poor really, really fast. So let's not get lost in the numbers. What about the feeling of it all? Well, in China, again, like I said, it's not black or white. You can feel super rich and super poor at the same time. I watch street races with Bugatti Veyrons and Ferraris, and then I can go to Guizhou or Yunnan province and actually go to these villages without running water, electricity, dirt roads, and see people suffering from malnutrition. I actually went to a small village in Guizhou where the children were actually missing their eyesight because they didn't have enough vitamins and minerals in their diet. So China can be a vastly different place. Now, I find China's growth astonishing. I visited hopeless villages in China where I go back and I find out that instead of the dirt roads and the lack of running water, there are now 4-lane highways in city centers that would make any small town in America blush. China is changing at an unbelievable pace. And honestly, you can't just take my word for it. You have to come here and see it for yourself. Anyway, Laowinners, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will catch you on the next one. Study from Peking University. 1/3 of China's population owns... I burped. It doesn't matter. As long as both things are there. Ready? 3, 2, 1. And because a lot of people come to China's cities to see... 3, 2, 1. Bigger wealth gap. That doesn't make sense. And that actually... And that is that... And that is...
Compare those provinces too.
And you can compare those. I've seen villages that... 3, 2... China is changing and it... Okay, I'm done. I'm gonna kill myself if I have to do this episode anymore. What? What? I forgot to get B-roll up there. I need to get some B-roll. Thank you very much to Serpent ZA for a lot of this footage. And a lot of this footage was actually taken from our documentary, Conquering Southern China. Winston and I actually rode 5,000 kilometers across all of southern China on our hand-built motorcycles, and we kind of skipped the big cities, and we kind of show the real China, the real rural China. So if you want to check it out, go over to Vimeo On Demand. The link is in the description, and you can still use the discount code LAOWINNING. Don't forget to type that in if you want a 10% discount. I promise you guys will enjoy it if you follow my other videos or any of the ADVChina stuff or any of Winston's videos on Serpent ZA. I think that you will very much enjoy the documentary. Don't forget to check it out. Thanks, guys.
So one of the stereotypes I've always tried to break through my YouTube videos is that China is actually an incredibly friendly and hospitable place.
欢迎你们到我们园园来。
非常感谢。吴哥很美丽的美女。
谢谢。外面去看一下吧。
好，你去看。哇，感谢你。
他们一次出游，刚好我们也是出游，我们在路上一起就碰见在一起了。
不要钱了，
Even in this poor place, she refused to take my money. She ran and like stuffed it in my My little strap here.
一块教养颜色，还有一块银颜色。对，都有。
What he said is like, you drink about 3 of those, you're gonna find a beautiful girl, and you're gonna last at least half an hour.
Being here so long and being able to speak the language and actually talk to the local people and experience all these different local cultures was something really special.